Hi everyone, this is Joanne Martonic with RBFF. Thank you for joining our webinar today, Insights on R3 Planning. Before we start things, I would like to go through a few housekeeping items. All phones are going to be kept on mute throughout the duration of the webinar. We will be having a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. You can ask questions at that time by using the Q&A box on the right side of your screen. If you don't see this questions box, you may need to expand the settings by clicking the little red arrow at the top right of the screen. Or if you have a question during the webinar, please write it into the questions box and we will then address it at the end. We'll read all questions out loud and address them with the group. A copy of the slides and a recording of today's presentation will be posted to the website following the webinar, and we will send an email to all attendees when these materials are available to download. Before exiting today's webinar, please take the time to fill out a quick survey that will pop up at the end. These questions will help us plan for future webinars and assess how we can better assist you in your marketing and R3 efforts. So we really appreciate your feedback on today's webinar. Thank you all for joining the RBFF webinar today, Insights on R3 Planning. I'd now like to turn it over to Stephanie Hussey, RBFF State R3 Program Director.
Thanks, Joanne. Hello. RBFF and our R3 consultants, DJ Case and Associates, have been working with the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission over the past year or so to develop an R3 plan. And Tabby Kenyon is their Education Division Chief, and she's been leading their R3 planning efforts, working with a team throughout the agency and with support from their director and assistant directors actively engaged in the process. They had an ambitious time frame to inform their budget cycle, and impressively, they not only got it done in February, but with an extensive and well-organized process, and they have since shifted into implementation. Tabby has graciously offered to share their experience and insights and their resources to help other states in R3 planning. And so now I'd like to turn it to Tabby.
All right, hello everybody. It's fun to see a bunch of names on the list that I know a lot of you. So thanks for being here. It's good to see some of your names. For those of you who I don't know and I haven't met, like they said, I'm Tabby Kenyon. I'm the Education Division Chief. I've been here in Arkansas for 2 years, and before that, I spent about 13 years with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So I've done a lot of R3 stuff for a long time, and it was a daunting process to go through the whole R3 planning process at a brand new agency that I had been in for just under a year when we started this. And one of the first things I did, and a place that a lot of you may be at, is I looked at what every other state had already done. And so this is my, hey, I stole a whole lot of really great ideas from a whole lot of other states. Here's what we did with it. I hope it helps you all as you move forward with this, because we're really all in this together. We all have our own states, but R3 it's a national thing. So we're gonna get started. Make sure my computer can move forward here. All right, so these are the things I'm gonna go through. The first part, I'm gonna give you some context about where we were coming from as an agency, why we pursued R3 the way we did, how we structured our whole plan, what we're doing right now as we have moved into implementation, all the stuff I wish I had known before we started this process, and then some of the outcomes that we're seeing even this early on in our R3 implementation. So when we look at how we fund conservation in Arkansas, we are a standalone agency, which means that back in the 40s, Arkansas Game and Fish Commission was taken out of the executive branch. We don't answer to the governor. He does appoint our commissioners, but we are not in the executive branch. So prior to this fiscal year, of course, we have seen a decline in license sales. And one thing that I thought was interesting about Arkansas when I got here is that the decline in license sales happened later than it did in other states, But when it happened fast. It was not a 0.5% here and there. It was 3 or 4% decline per year. So we'd seen this decline in license sales, and thankfully, not to spoil it, but 2020, our fiscal year 2020, this is no longer the case. So, and we were seeing increases even before COVID hit, but as you all know, COVID was something that got people back outside. The other thing to point out here is that we have a conservation sales tax in Arkansas, and that conservation sales tax was passed in the 90s, and it is a critical thing that we need the public to continue to understand, appreciate, and support. So that conservation sales tax really needed to be part of our R3 planning as protecting our overall funds for the future. And just like many other states, the economic impact of the outdoor industry in our little state of 3 million people is a huge, it has a huge impact. So it is an important piece of a puzzle in a state that calls itself the natural state. And finally, here's how our agency is organized. We have those commissioners. We get a new commissioner every year appointed by the governor. We have our director, and then we have these 3 deputy directors. And these 3 deputy directors' names you will see come up again, because this R3 planning process took people from the top of the agency structure all the way to the people who are new to the agency and working in the fields to pull off this R3 plan. So the first thing we did was we worked with RBFF and Phil Sang from DJ Case, and they helped us so much. It was a very valuable planning tool for us because they have seen so many other states go through it. And those, I was on a call with them every single month, and that call saved my sanity as we were trying to build an R3 plan for an entire agency in 6 months or less. So couldn't have done it without them. So we did go with an internal agency only plan. And I know that that's a question that a lot of states will have. Like, I looked at the California plan, and the California plan looked awesome. However, we were trying to move really fast, and that one takes a whole lot of partners to get things done. And so we also have this agency where that conservation sales tax allows us to have an 80-person education team. So we have all of the education team members working on R3 activities. We have our enforcement officers. We have our family and community fishing program out of our fisheries division. We had a whole lot going on that needed to be better coordinated. And we also knew that we were going to pursue something that was very measurable and that we could compare results year to year. So we went internal, and we know that now we can influence whether or not the things we put in this plan are actually happening. And we also assume that if we're doing it better inside our agency, if we coordinate better, if we combine all this R3 stuff and make it a package where a person can move seamlessly from program to program, that we can more effectively work with our partners and other stakeholders to coordinate across Arkansas. And I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, so we started with a why. And if you don't know who that is, he wrote a book called Start With Why. So this why is where we started with. And it was the central premise of what we were setting out to do. And it was also visible in every single meeting that we had, whether it was on the top of the agenda or posted in the room. This was our central why we were sitting there, why we were working on this. And then this was the question that we were setting out to answer. And if the conversations that we were having veered away from answering this question, then it wasn't the right time or place for that conversation. Because when you're trying to take a group of 23 people and move them through a process to answer this question in such a short time, being focused is, I think it was really the only way that we were able to get through it. So when we started this process, we knew we needed a team, and we selected people that would move the plan forward. And we didn't select all the typical R3 players. There were people who had been doing R3 work in the agency for a decade before we got to this point. And this plan just built on all of that work. But we brought in this team. They were from across the agency, and we knew that this group had the right attitudes, the right perspectives, and were able and willing to be there. And then the process, when you're doing this plan, when you're doing an R3 plan, it'd be really easy for 5 or 6 people to sit and put together a plan and send it out to the agency. But one of the most valuable parts of any planning process is the process itself. And so this team of 23 players represented 9 out of our 12 divisions. And those other divisions are very small, with 2 or 3 people in each division. We had 2 of our deputy directors participate in the entire process alongside our field staff. So they were in on all the meetings, they were brainstorming, they were talking through stuff. And their presence and that amount of time invested really demonstrates to the entire agency how important this issue is to us. And so we have this representative team, and hopefully these people are the ones that go back and talk to the other people in their divisions and really help people understand what we were setting out to do. And then you'll see the little stars next to some of these names. That was our core writing team, because you cannot write a document with 23 people. I don't know if you've ever tried to group edit something, but 8 people some days started to feel like way too many. So we had that smaller writing team really got together and processed a lot of content. So before our first meeting, we selected this team of 23 people, and we knew that when Phil came to town a year ago, that we wanted to not start out our R3 planning meeting with what R3 is and all of that background information. So before that, we did 2 webinars, and now we do webinars every single day of our lives. But a year and a half ago, it was still kind of a novel thing for our agency to have webinars. But so we put together a couple webinars to set the project expectations and to start building the knowledge base. And then we use the R3 community on the National R3 Plan page we created an Arkansas group, and every day, every work day leading up to our end of July meeting, we've hosted another resource for people to read, look through, and help them be prepared for this meeting. So that instead of doing a 2-hour, here's everything you need to know about R3, it was a 10-minute a day post article, look through this plan, look through the national plans, look through other state plans, those sorts of posts, so that people were building their own knowledge base, but in small chunks instead of one just fire hydrant moment. And so, like I said, our planning meeting happened at the end of July of 2019. In some ways, it feels like that was a minute ago, and in other ways, July 2019 may as well have been 10 years ago. So this is our schedule. You don't have to read through this. This page is actually in the plan itself, because I was wishing for this when I was looking at other plans, so I put it in our plan. And then on the digital version, that PDF version on our website, I put links to all of our agendas and our outlines and whatever other resource we created. I have shared that with you guys so that if it helps, fantastic. If not, it took me a few seconds to add a link so that other people can look at it. So also on this schedule, you'll notice that we met a year ago. Our planned completion date was February 1st. And like Stephanie said, they totally didn't believe me that we were going to get this done. And I told my boss one day, I'm like, I don't think they know me. But it is really short in government agency land to create a plan with this many people and this big of a scope in that amount of time. But with a deadline of 6 months, we've focused on it. We kept it moving. It didn't get pushed aside, and then you picked it up 2 months later and went, what was this sentence about? There was no time for that. So we got through it. It also allowed us to plan for, like Stephanie said, our budget for this current fiscal year, so that we knew what we were going to invest in, what kind of strategies we wanted to work on this year, what actions we were going to take. And the other thing was that the director said that this was one of our top agency priorities. Every year he gives us a list of what our agency is working on, and this one was at the top. So we took it seriously. So here's our writing team. This is an example of one of our writing team meeting agendas. So at the top, you can see why, and you can see the question, and then what the meeting outcomes were for that meeting. I will tell you that I never actually got through all of my meeting outcomes I wished for in any of our meetings, but it was a good way to keep the conversation going forward, to have a purpose that everybody understood what we were setting out to do. The other thing that was so valuable to us is that Google Docs allowed us to share all of our information. It allowed multiple people to be in the same document writing at the same time. So the day we were working on our glossary or our list of terms, we were all in the document working on different terms at the same time. And we didn't have to do that weird sharing thing where you don't know what version of the Word document you have. It was, thank goodness for Google Docs is what we learned. But anyway, so if you visit this website, the agfc.com/R3, you can get a copy of this plan. If you need a smaller copy, you can email me. There's, I think my email address is somewhere. It's not hard to find, but I have a small email version where the pictures aren't as clear as they are on the website version. So we're going to talk about the structure of our plan. And structuring the R3 plan is a big question that you'll have for yourself, or if you've already been through R3 planning, you had to figure out a structure that hopefully works for you. But the first step, like I said, we reviewed everybody else's plans, and Phil had a lot of really great resources and ideas for us. He definitely helped us where you're looking at that blank wall just going, I don't know. But I feel pretty good that we landed on our 4 activity areas. And on the right-hand side of my slide, you can see that there are those 4 activities right there. It's fishing, hunting, recreational shooting, and support and connect is that last category. Some states call that wildlife viewing. Some states leave it off altogether. A lot of states have voting enforcement and that sort of stuff in their agency, voter registration. We don't have that. We don't do that. So we don't have a voting section on here. Anything to do with paddling and getting people out fishing on the water is either in fishing or it's in support and connect. The other thing about support and connect goes back to that Amendment 75, that conservation sales tax that we really want the public to understand and appreciate what's going on. So the activities, so we took those 4 activities, we broke it down. We started out our first day, I think we had 11 or 12 goals. And then when we sat down and looked at it, it just boiled down to 7. And I'll show you those 7 goals in just a little bit. From there, we have the objectives, the strategies, and then what we ended up with at the end of the day is a very fancy 5-year-long to-do list of 247 things we're going to try and do and see if they have an impact on recruiting these folks into the wildlife recreation world. This is one of the documents from our very, very first meeting, and we started this whole thing by looking at target audiences. What audiences do we really, in the first 5 years of this, do we think will have the biggest impact on? So audience, one thing that we were really careful about is, especially when you sit down with a bunch of wildlife people, they say the general public. Well, the general public is broken down into a whole lot of different groups. So we very purposely worked through which groups we wanted to focus on for every single objective. And then you'll see this is one of the outline pages. This has all of our goals and all of those objectives on the page. So you get your activity, you get your goals, and then the objectives. And if you look at these objectives, they're pretty measurable. But I want to point out again that even in the plan itself, we have the why and the question we're addressing up front and also called out in different places. Because not only did we need to understand it as the people writing and creating the plan, but every employee who picks this up and is responsible for helping implement this has to understand why it's important and what we're really setting out to do. So I'm just going to go through our goals really quick because they're really simple. Our fishing goal, we want to increase participation. Same thing for hunting. Same thing for recreational shooting, but we also want to take recreational shooters who don't already purchase hunting and fishing licenses and get them out in the field. And then this is our support and connect section. So we want them to get outdoors and recreate, and that includes wildlife viewing. We want all our Kansans, whether or not they hunt and fish, to support hunting, angling, and recreational shooting. And there's that Amendment 75, that conservation sales tax piece again. For each goal, we then take those and we break them down into objectives. And these objectives are measurable, but you have to do a whole lot of things to accomplish this objective. For each objective, we broke it down, and this is a template from science standards in Colorado. Back when I was the education coordinator in Colorado, I was really fortunate to get to write the science standards. And organizing a whole lot of information and a whole lot of people writing academic standards is a much bigger project than this R3 plan. And one of the things I loved is that they gave us the chart, and we were given the chart and the training in order to find out, or in order to be able to fill this out for each piece of the standards process. So I created one of those for the R3 plan, because one of the things that I was struggling with our team was the level of detail. Some people want to stay right there at the surface, and other people want to go into the number of stickers we're going to order in order to give these out at every fishing clinic. Like those two things, we had to find that common middle ground, because one version of that is a 10-page plan that says we're going to do R3, and the other is a 500-page plan that nobody would ever read. So these charts really helped us out once we got to it. So you can see the activities at the top, the goal. Each objective had its entire own page, and these are Google Sheet pages. So each objective had its own page, and then strategies are the next level down. For each strategy, we did some actions, and then we had to determine how we were going to measure these things. So those metrics are our measurements. And the evaluation is, does it matter if we did these actions? Does it matter if we did any of this stuff? So I'm going to go back. If I handed charts, if I handed 26 of these charts to a staff member who wasn't involved in the process, it would be fine. It's organized, but it's not particularly easy to digest if you weren't involved in it. So we worked with our marketing firm to create the actual layout of this plan. And we were very purposeful about that. And we did spend money on it, but we needed a plan that we could hand to a commissioner or a law enforcement officer, anybody, and they could open it up and they could really get into it and feel like it's not super overwhelming. So this is just one page and one of the objective pages. So each objective, like I said before, that's that increase the retention rate of license holders by 3% each year. Each of these strategies are the A and B, and then the actions are the numbers. You can see the resources, the audience, and then how we're going to know if we're making this. And that's something that some R3 plans had really strongly, others didn't. But for us, this metrics piece is what makes implementation and the implementation team know what they need to be doing to help determine whether these actions are really making the impact we hope they are. Of course, now I have to find my spot because I just went off book again. So implementation, that's where we're at now. Implementation, I think, is the much more fun part than the planning part. We took all of those actions, and before we published the plan, we wrote all of them on sticky notes, and then we organized sticky notes and we moved them around. And of course, each color is a different activity in the plan. And then we put them into the plan as a suggestion. And of course, the world has changed, and some of the actions that we had put out for a few years, like doing more video content, all of a sudden happened this year. So this is our schedule that we put in the plan. Thankfully, we're still on this schedule. So the director had approved the plan. We presented this to our commission. We had a commissioner stand up and applaud, and he's been really critical of R3. So that was a nice moment for our entire team. And then we established our implementation teams, and by next June, we'll have our evaluation pieces in place. So implementation is something that there isn't a great guidebook on at this point. So we're just, like everything, figuring it out as we go based on a whole lot of working on projects and government agencies in the past for all of us on this list. So our steering committee, you can see the 3 deputy directors in our agency are on the steering committee, myself and some of the other folks that have been very heavily involved. And Holly she's a new education assistant chief for me. And so she's gonna take on coordinating with these teams. So we decided that those 23 people who wrote the plan, it was time for most of them to hand the baton off to some other staff members. And there's a few reasons for this. One, it's exhausting doing this all the time. Trust me, I'm exhausted by this topic. 2, the more people that have their hands in this R3 mix, the more buy-in there is across the agency. And 3, it just felt like it was time to bring in some folks that maybe weren't the R3 planner kind of people, but are the people who are out in the field doing this stuff every day, and this would give them a chance to coordinate and do things better. So here's our implementation team, and these action teams are as diverse as we could possibly make them. We spent hours going through names in our agency. So the team leads that you see here, we actually did pull people from the writing team to be the team leads, to create that continuity between the writing and what those documents mean for these folks who are actually going to be working across the agency to make sure these things are happening. And then as far as the people on the team, we've got a diversity of people in positions, in gender, in race, in division, in age, in time with the agency, their position, where they are located across the state. We did the best we could to have a team that represents a broad swath of our agency and represents our public as best as we can. And you'll see that there's a lot of people in the education division, but we have a very large education division, so it's less than 20% of our team is actually on this planning or on the action teams. So just like when we set up the writing team, we set up expectations for our implementation teams, and I asked for 1 year from these folks because we're asking a lot in this first year. They've already been meeting once a month and doing work in between. So it says minimum quarterly meetings. I probably meant minimum monthly meetings when it comes to getting this done. And then we created a deliverables list. And this deliverables list, each quarter, they are responsible for getting us basically this stuff. What's been going on, who's responsible for what's going on in the next year, what's been completed, what our outcomes are, and also what's not happening, and that the folks on the steering committee can clear roadblocks. Because, you know, we're also busy, we don't have anything in the field that if we just shifted some resources or changed something, we could open up those doors. And then also just what else? This plan has 247 things that we can do, but there are millions of things we could do for R3. So what else has been going on? Again, we made a new Google sheet to track this. So you can see across the bottom, I have fishing, hunting. Each one of the 7 goals has its own sheet. And then on that sheet, you have the objectives, the strategies, and the actions. And that the teams are able to make notes about when it was accomplished, what's happening, what resources they need. There are a whole lot of columns off to the right that aren't included on this slide. But I found very quickly that spreadsheets that are well organized are the only way to communicate the volume of information with this many people involved. So the other thing to help set up these action teams to be successful, Deputy Director Chris Culplaser, he's my boss. He's over all the outreach and enforcement folks, all of the people who talk to the public. We created an R3 training for the entire agency because we throw around that term a lot. Think of how many times a day you throw around that term and you assume that people across your agency probably know what you're talking about. I think a lot of them have an idea, but most of them have not seen the outdoor recreation adoption model. Most of them have not really thought about how R3 and their job intertwine. And in order for us to be successful at this, they really need to see those things. So we pulled together, and this just happened in June this year. So of course it was a virtual webinar that covered these topics, and our director sent out a link to the R3 plan, letting people know that it's critical for everybody on our team to be involved. And also we're getting a new performance system, and the R3 plan will be incorporated into the things that people can select as part of their personal performance planning. And the other thing that was sent out after the webinar, we sent out the link, so the entire agency had the link to the webinar and the plan. But the other things that we're asking, reminding all staff members to buy hunting and fishing license. Even if they choose not to participate, it's an important piece of, you all know what a hunting and fishing license sale brings to our agencies. It's more than just the dollars from that license sale. So encouraging staff to be participating that way. And that last bullet, it's on all of us to create this change. It's our job to pass these agencies on that are healthy and functioning well to the future employees of these agencies after we leave. So some of our early wins. Our plan started, our scope starts July 1st of 2020, but just like with any time you get a bunch of really excited people working together, we had 50 of our actions working either in progress or checked off by the time July 1st rolled around, because these ideas got put down on paper, they were good ideas, and it just started. Nobody waited until it was published. We saw license increases 11 out of 12 months in 2020. So overall, we were up about 7% in fishing license sales for the 12-month period. Of course, April, May, June, we were up over 30%, just like every other state. People got out and they went fishing, which is great. It has a little to do with our R3 plan, not a lot though. We've also seen a huge increase in applications for public land permits this coming deer season. So I think we're all really fortunate that people are interested in going outdoors again right now. So the other thing that happened is just a better connection to R3 across the agency. We have a team of educators that have been meeting to coordinate and be thoughtful about our programming, so that we're thinking about not just that entry-level programming, that first fishing clinic, but also how do you go to the store and buy your first tackle box? And once you bought that first tackle box and that first fishing pole, how do you figure out where to go on your own, that sort of stuff. And one of the things that came out of this COVID disaster is that we created our virtual nature center. We have almost 10. We're opening another nature center this fall, but we had 9 facilities with educators in every facility, and we had to shut the doors. And we had all these educators, and they went online and started creating content. And we created a nature center online. And we met a lot of our R3 action goals by just being able to do a digital, just living in that digital space. And so we're only a few weeks into implementing this plan. And I think in 6 months, in a year, we will have learned a lot. I think we'll be editing our plan at that point because, you know, it's not a static document. So the last piece I'll talk about before you guys can ask questions, if anybody's still listening, the things I'm really glad we did. Things I would recommend you do if you were doing a plan. I would recommend working with RBFF. They were the catalyst for this to happen. Their conversations with our director really helped launch this thing that had been kind of hanging out there. Everybody knew we needed an R3 plan. Nobody really wanted to own it, take it on. their conversations really launched this. And like I said, those monthly phone calls with Stephanie and Phil were critical to keeping it moving forward. I would say make sure you have those right people in the room and that represent every level of your agency. And we actually hurt a lot of feelings when we selected the team, but those hurt feelings, it was more important to have the team that we had to move this forward as quickly as we had to move it forward. The other thing is that I would say having 23 people write a plan is a lot of people, and it would have been easier with fewer people, but the buy-in was far greater by having all those people on our team. I'd say building that template I showed you, the Google Sheet templates, I wish we had had that from the very beginning, and spending some time really thinking through that up front would have made life easier for everybody involved from the get-go. I like that we had a short time frame, 6 months from beginning to end, made the project happen. I had to shift a lot of my focus away from the other parts of my job, but I'm on a really strong team, which made that possible. And giving the final product to a marketing expert who can create a beautiful layout and also some really nice slide layouts for you when you're going around talking about the plan. They really helped elevate this and made it look like it was worthy of the amount of time and heart and effort that went into creating it. Things that I would do if I were going to start over again, I'd invite everyone in the agency to participate in that month-long Intro to R3 program and all the online posts. And then after they had had time to learn about R3, I would have asked for volunteers from around the agency. I think we would have gotten some new voices in the room that we weren't necessarily aware of when we were picking our team members. I would have spent more time allowing the activity groups to cross-pollinate and talk to each other. There's some identical things from fishing and hunting that could have been combined and done together at the same time that we just, everybody just kind of worked in their subject area. I think we could have had a much more polished set of actions if we had collaborated a bit more across those lines. And I would have spent more time figuring out the exact level of detail and helping communicate that to the teams up front, because some teams, we spent a lot of time on the back end trying to get them to give us enough detail to make it worthwhile. And then other teams, we spent a lot of time editing stuff out because it was too detailed for the plan. But overall, I would say that there's never a time when this stuff is going to be done. It's never finished. The document that you have, I know of typos, I know of things that everything has changed and they're in the wrong years. You just have to stop and hit the print button at some point and then keep going. And COVID has been a boost for all of us, but now some of our R3 questions are, how do we retain those folks that have just come back or have just shown up for the first time? Those are different actions, those are different strategies that our team will need to be considering in the next few months that should be added into this. And, you know, R3 is, like I said, this document won't be done, but at least now we have a way to coordinate, and something that when someone approaches us and says, I want to do this online class for you, or I want to create a website. I was approached by somebody who wanted to create a website and link to Game and Fish. And it was something that linked directly to some of our strategies in the R3 plan. And all of a sudden I have a tool on my desk that I can pick up and be like, yes, absolutely, this is the direction we're going. I didn't need to have a bunch of conversations with a whole lot of people to figure out if this is somewhere we want to go. So it's a really useful tool. And, you know, it's something that a lot of people can rally around. And I think in any agency, staff show up and they want to rally around a mission that's bigger than themselves. And that's what draws us to the public service field anyway, is that bigger purpose than ourselves. So with that, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Tabby. So yeah, it definitely didn't take me long to get to know Tabby and her organization and all that she brought to the process with her education background, and how much fun it was to work through this planning process with Tabby. And Tabby, I want to thank you for all your hard work and for this accomplishment for your agency. And I really appreciate you taking the time to share all this with other agencies and to open up all your resources to everyone. So thank you for the wealth of information. And I'll turn it back to Joanne to field us through the Q&A.
Great, thank you very much, both Tabby and Stephanie. So we will now answer questions. If you have any questions, go ahead and type it into the Q&A box on the right side of your screen. We'll read these out loud so Tabby and or Stephanie can answer. We do have a few questions already in. The first one is about accessing a copy of your R3 plan. It says, how can we get a PDF of the plan? The link that you provided doesn't seem to allow for you to download it. So how can we get a PDF?
I can either, well, you can either email me directly, that email address is on your screen, or I can give it to Joanna to send out to all of you, because I do have an email-sized version to email out.
Great, yeah, I think that'd be best. I'll have Tabby send me, and when I let everyone know that the information and the presentation are online, I'll include a PDF of her R3 plan at the same time. Thanks. The next question is, did you get any pushback from internal agency staff that creating an R3 action plan isn't necessary? Or in other words, was your agency culture supportive of this effort?
There had been some real, honestly, there had been some real hurt feelings. There had been some stuff that happened with R3 before I got there. So I think there was some real skepticism. Some people saw it as us starting over, and a lot of it was just being really clear that we were building on all of the work that had gone before us, and that this was our next step. So while I'm sure there are still people who think it was a waste of time, because that's how agencies are sometimes, for the most part, we've gotten really amazing feedback from staff. So there's always those folks that are slow to adopt, but so far so good. And I like to, it's really fun to see the staff get behind these ideas and make them happen.
Great, thanks. The next question is, does the planning team continue to meet? What happens with the activity team after the 1-year commitment?
So the original 23 folks, we did a final meeting, and we ended that team, if that makes sense. We came together, we accomplished something, we celebrated it, and drew a line. And now these implementation teams, we did say that it is a 1-year commitment, where next May, we're going to talk to them and say, are you interested in continuing? And if not, we'll bring in other people. It is a big time commitment, and people have a whole lot going on. And of course, people change positions. And this topic is important enough that we want to give anybody who wants to help implement this the opportunity to be part of the leadership piece of this. So those leadership teams, we asked for a year. After seeing them work, my guess is that most of them will continue on for a while.
Oh, that's good to hear. Next question is 2 parts. One, did you hire an R3 coordinator, and do you have an R3 budget? We did not hire an R3 coordinator in that sense of the word. Our director and deputy directors think of R3 as something that all of us have to be part of, so it's something that we're all responsible for. Holly Sanders is my new assistant chief of education, and Holly is the one responsible for pushing the R3 implementation forward. So while she is not technically an R3 coordinator, she's the one who, like, I get to stop pushing so hard and she gets to pick up that and start pushing it next. Oh, and budget-wise, there isn't a separate standalone R3 budget. We do have a marketing coordinator who has a significant marketing budget. We have a significant education division budget. It's something that if we need to invest in something specific to R3, we'll find it within the divisions that we have right now. Gotcha. Okay, and that kind of leads into the next question is, did you go out and solicit partners to either help fund or help implement any of the programs?
So we will at a certain point. Right now we're working through, and it's one of the actions, but one of the things we're working through is a partnership policy or a sponsorship and partnership policy so that we can fairly solicit sponsors for programs. The other thing that we have worked on is, gosh, I mean, the partnership piece is something that I think we will continue to do better on. And we have MOUs with several organizations already. We're building a new nature center where we've got partners and sponsors. So it's part of how we get this stuff done, but not specific in this plan. I don't think. I don't know if I answered that question very well. Brenda forgot the question.
I think you did, and you also helped answer the next question, which you might, I don't know if you need to elaborate on it anymore, but the next question is, do you plan to modify your R3 plan in the future to involve more external partners and stakeholders?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we did is we have a partners group with mostly with the hunting partners, the NGOs, the Cabela's, Bass Pro folks, and they have seen this plan. We presented this plan. When we presented it, we committed to working with them to help, because we can't do this as an agency alone. It has to be part of the community. So we will be continually working with partners. You'll see, if you look through the actions, there's a lot of actions that say directly work with partner organizations to accomplish X, Y, and Z.
Gotcha. So it sounds like it's more action item steps than a whole new part of the bigger plan.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question is, were the marketing enhancements made internally, or is that a third-party vendor? I believe this is talking about the enhancements you made to the plan itself.
It's a third-party vendor. It's a marketing firm we have a contract with here in Little Rock. So our marketing manager actually he worked for our marketing firm and ended up coming over. So he facilitates a lot of our marketing work through them, because we only have one marketing person on staff. So.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, great. The next question is, how did you decide to choose to make your overall timeline of 5 years? And also, how did you decide on the percentage of license sales increase in your goals?
So the 5 years was something that we all just said, that's a time frame that we can think through and make edits as we go. The percentages make me laugh because it was the hardest part. Those percentages you saw on the plan were X's up until like month 5.5. And I finally said, it has to be so, you guys have to do the math and figure out something that will make a difference, but is attainable. So if they said 15% when we've been seeing a 3% decline, that would be a goal or a strategy that was unattainable. So some of them are a little bit arbitrary, but the people who were behind those felt confident that those numbers would make a big difference. So it's hard.
Right.
It's hard to make this stuff measurable.
Yeah, it sounds like you had to do kind of some historical research over sales and then, think about what is attainable. So good that it wasn't completely arbitrary, but you sat down and thought about it.
Yeah.
The next person says, great presentation. Out of curiosity, do you think your agency culture has changed as a result of your R3 plan? And if so, do you think that doing the agency-wide R3 training helped with that?
So from my seat, it's really hard to answer that question because I am in a leadership position and I am so new to this agency. 2 years in agency world is nothing. I can say confidently for my division, I've seen a big culture shift and people rallying around having a purpose that's written down on paper that they can all work towards together. I hope that that's happening across the agency. I know that that's a big part of what our implementation teams really are about, is being the liaisons and working with the field staff and talking to people about this in a way that makes people go, oh yeah, we should be working on this. This is good stuff.
Great. Another question is, and I think we have time for maybe just one more, is how did you facilitate the work so that 1 or 2 really forceful people don't dominate the planning with their vision and ideas?
First off, I'm very thankful that those folks weren't, the folks we had in the room and at the tables were really collaborative people. We had a little bit of that on some of our teams, but as a facilitator, it's going around from group to group, talking to them, sitting with them, and in a way, just being lucky that we had the people we had. And luck, I say luck, we were very purposeful about that. The people that tend to dominate conversations are some of the ones that had their feelings hurt when they weren't included in the planning process in the first place. And hurt feelings, in order to make sure that we hear from everybody, we made sure we could hear from everybody.
Great. And I would like to say I was in some of the planning process that Arkansas had, and I think everyone did a really good job of just yielding the floor and listening to people, especially in some of like the breakout groups when trying to do it by activity. I think everyone was really cognizant of other people's voices and opinions.
Yeah.
Looks like that is it for now, and we've hit 3 o'clock. There are a few other questions, but those 2 didn't get answered. I will follow up with you and Tabby so we can make sure you get the information you need. Again, we will put a recording of the presentation and PDF of the slides online, And you please also fill out the survey that pops up as you exit the webinar. So thank you very much all for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.